And we are live for this week's Windy City Hockey. And well, it's been interesting as I know I couldn't do the live streams the last 2 weeks, but we're back to doing weekly live streams again starting today and going back for next week and week following that up until the regular season. And well, some news has come out over the last 24 hours basically involving the Blackhawks ownership of the Warts Corporation. And well, the Warts Corporation has purchased US HL team, the Chicago Steel. It's a big purchase for the Hawks and, well, technically the Warts Corporation because I don't believe they can say the Blackhawks officially purchased the team because I don't think a NHL team's allowed to own a junior team, so they went under the Warts Corp. Yeah, I can't wait for training camp either. Should be fun. I don't know if you notice, there is a New Jersey kind of in the background right there. But this should be a fun live stream. Hey, Ryan, and how are you doing today, Ryan? Let's see what's going on. Hey, Jake. How are you? Yep. I've had the jersey for just about 5 months, but I got it autographed by Yarger on Friday. I'm doing all right. I don't know how long we'll go live for today, but maybe, how about this? I'm going to share a link for you guys. If you want to hop into the live stream, you can. I'm going to do something fun for today. So if you click that link, you could hop into the live stream and we could talk for a little bit if you want. Yep, 71 days until opening night of the NHL regular season. Yep. Yeah, I can't wait to see Bedard in a game. I will be going to home opener and several other, like 10 other home games this season. What's up, Jake?
Howdy.
How are you doing?
Good. Area. 1 second. All right. We're back. Sad to meet you on the actual main video. Otherwise, I was going to get an echo for like the next who knows how long.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm doing well, honestly. Training camp just started for the NFL season, hence the.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. So, yeah, it's not going to be too long before it's going to be wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, for the sports season's upcoming.
Yep.
So, yeah, basically kind of enjoying the last few days, before, things really kick off here. And then, won't be too much longer than after the season begins. Then we have hockey again. So,
yeah. I just know I will be probably purchasing my Connor Bedard jersey this Friday.
Nice. Have you decided what kind, or are you going to leave it a surprise?
Leave it a surprise.
All right. But yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much like I say, just kind of chilling, relaxing, and just kind of watching training camp for football, basically.
Yeah.
However, though, the Wild had some breaking news happen today. I don't know if you heard about that or not.
Gustafson.
Yep, 3 years at 11.75 mil. No, 11.25 mil, 3.75 AAV.
Seems like a little high for AAV, but it's not bad contract, I guess.
Well, he's also like 25 years old, and last year was really the first time you actually had a chance to see him for more than 3 games.
Yeah, that's why I was saying that's a little bit of high AAV, but we'll see what happens coming
Yeah.
down the line.
Honestly, what I think this is, basically what this tells me is that Gustafson's going to be the number one guy.
Yeah.
So that way Fleury can kind of just, come in when he needs to. We don't necessarily have to, ride Fleury into the sunset, basically. And we can also keep Wallstead down in Iowa to develop and become, well, pretty much the goaltender everyone thinks he will be. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I'll tell you what, though, if Wallstead is what I think he is, we might be looking at another, like, Lundqvist situation here.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to complain there because, well, let's put it this way. The 2025-2026 NHL Central Division could be a very exciting one.
Oh, yeah.
Because let's see here. I mean, obviously, your Blackhawks, Bedard will actually be a few years in, so he'll have some experience under his belt. Who knows what your team will look like around there. The Wild will finally be out of cap hell. So we can actually make some more moves, maybe, utilize some of our prospects and stuff like that and all that stuff. And then, some of these other teams, like St. Louis, Nashville, teams like that who are kind of going through their young, rebuild phase and stuff like that too. I mean, the Central could be an interesting division. And if Arizona can pull something out of their butts, I mean, you can't sleep on them anymore either. They're starting to develop a little bit of a team going on down there. I don't, expect them to do much this year, but they're definitely not going to be an easy out. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how are you doing?
Well, I went to 2 Cub games this last weekend, went up to Chicago, met Yarger, so it's, I would say, pretty good.
There we go. I had to turn on my light. Hey, I can actually see you now. No. But yeah. Yeah, like I say, I saw the pictures and stuff like that. That's awesome, Get a couple of your jerseys signed or get a jersey signed by him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whew.
Okay, what prospect are you looking forward for most for the Wild that's not Rossi?
Honestly, I'd have to say Sammy Walker is probably the one that's most intriguing for me.
Okay.
Faber, I don't know if you'd necessarily consider him a prospect anymore now that he has enough experience in the NHL.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider him one.
And then probably Wallstead, honestly. I mean, between Wallstead and Walker, Rossi, and Faber, that's probably going to be like the 4-piece of the future, basically. 4 pieces of the future if everything, turns out well and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But outside of Bedard, who are you looking forward to then?
Well, there's several prospects I'm looking forward to seeing that's not Bedard. Kevin Korchinski, of course, being supposed to be our best defensive prospect in the system. I really hope this player makes it. I get it. He was a 5th-round pick this year, and Marcel.
Oh, yeah, that just by the name alone is hilarious.
Yes. The kid is 6'6.5".
Yeah.
And he's a funny guy. So I kind of hope he makes it.
Well, I kind of feel that way about another, well, I guess draft pick, but Charlie Stramel. That's another name I'm going to be kind of keeping an eye on because, well, it depending on who you talk to, will depend on whether or not you want him to succeed or if he's going to bust out of the league. Because it's just like, I remember when we drafted him, I couldn't even go on wild Twitter for like the next hour or two afterwards. I mean, it was
Oh,
like we finally drafted a big, lengthy center. Went
mhm.
center 3 out of our first 4 picks, by the way.
Yeah.
And I mean, what more do you want? I mean, he's like 17, 18 years old and stuff like that. And Wisconsin was an absolute dumpster fire after the Cole Caulfield era, like they so they're finally sounds like they're turning it around there too, or at least they've hired some new guys and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, and that's just it too. It's just like it's hard to necessarily put a name, a number, like a thought on some of these guys because again, they're not all going to be Bedard. They're not all going to be McDavid. They're not all going to be Sidney Crosby. That just come right out of the juniors and tear up the league. A
Yeah.
lot of these guys are going to take time to develop.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean you give up on them because how many times have you seen a prospect go through the Blackhawks organization that, well, if they would have held on just 2 more years,
Oh yeah.
X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, even in the NFL too, there's some players like that. For the Vikings, I can think of who are similar to that too, where it's like it's always such a balancing act. And I know in the NHL you only have like 20 players or something like that at any given night.
23.
So yeah, it's like sometimes you just have to give guys a little more, seasoning and let them actually develop a little bit more. But kind of keep an eye on that too, because you only have so much time before, you have to make a decision, whether it be right,
Mhm.
wrong, or whatnot.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to look into because I get it. The division for the Central is going to be the worst this season in the NHL. I will say that. But you're going to start seeing the this season as a year of transition of young players in the Central
Mm-hmm.
Division coming through. So, what player on the Blackhawks are you at least looking forward to facing that's not Connor Bedard?
Well, does it have to be the youth, or does it just have to be any player?
It can be anyone because I know you might not know all the players from the Hawk system.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I really don't know a lot of them just because, again, there is so much youth and so many transitions and stuff like that have happened. But, I mean, Corey Perry's always a pain in the ass. So is, Foligno. You can never, count those guys out at all. I mean, maybe Reichel, but like I say, I haven't really seen him enough to really gauge one way or the other. And honestly, like I say, there's been so much turnover on the Blackhawks. I really couldn't tell you what players, really scare me per se. But I do know that, obviously Bedard's probably going to be the number one answer, at least for the future, especially if he's anything like Kane and Ortiz, like he's
Yeah.
going to be that cornerstone piece. But I mean, Corey Perry is always one of those players that's a thorn in anyone's side.
Oh yeah.
And also, too, some of the youth, they'll have another year under their belt, stepping it up and stuff like that, too. But I don't know. I don't really feel like the Wild and Blackhawks rivalry, really outside of Hartman, I'd say, is really that personal anymore ever since, kind of like the whole Kane and Taze era is now finally complete. And,
Mhm.
you guys are kind of, in your rebuild and all that stuff and kind of cleaning out of old regimes and old skeletons and stuff like that too, where honestly, I just, and plus being where I'm at too, it's not like I can necessarily get Blackhawks games that easily unless they're either
Yeah.
nationally televised or an ESPN Plus feature. Because
Mhm.
that's another issue is blackout.
Yeah. The
That
NHL
is a
really
pain
does.
in the freaking butt.
Yeah. NHL needs to get rid of the blackouts, especially with
Especially being in Iowa, because there's like 4 teams or
Mhm.
3 to 4 teams. You have the Wild, the Blackhawks, the Blues, and maybe I guess not so much the Avalanche, but that'd probably be the 4th team. But yeah, like I say, the Blackhawks, the Blues, and the Wild.
Mhm.
like good luck trying to figure out what game's even going to be on. Thankfully, where I'm at, it's wild country and like Minnesota territory and stuff like that. But you get into like central Iowa and places even further south, you're in more Blues territory. And I wanted to watch a few more Blues games last year, even on ESPN Plus, but it was blacked out because local restrictions. And I'm like, which is interesting considering I'm pretty sure the year before I could. Anyway, regardless, though, that's a different tangent for a different day. But
Yeah.
basically, to kind of sum this up, I'd say probably Perry, Foligno, Hall is another good one. And yeah, I mean, that's really about it that I can think of off the top of my head post Bedard. But I
Mhm.
will also spin you this question, though. Who
Okay.
do you least like, or like, who are you least likely to? How do I want to rephrase this here? Basically, who do you not want to play as a Blackhawks fan against the Wild right now? Outside of
Uh,
Kaprizov.
it's probably Boldy.
Yeah. I'll tell you, yeah, I mean, that's one of those things, too, where he got a little bit of muscle on him last year, and he just stepped up his game big time, in my opinion. I
Oh yeah.
want him to be a little more consistent this year. I'd probably say that's one of the big things I need to see him do is be more steady with the scoring and stuff like that, because there were stretches last year where him, Zuccarello, and some of our big dogs were, not producing and scoring, especially when Kaprizov kind of tailed off. Thankfully, we had enough offensive firepower to step it up and at the very least win a few games. Maybe not the easiest way in the world, but
Yeah.
that's where depth really kind of comes into play and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that's a good choice. Any other ones that you could think of? Or
Kalen Addison, maybe.
yeah, yeah, that's actually interesting you bring that up too, because out now that all that stuff is done, Addison is, inept to, well, basically he cannot go into arbitration
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So this is going to be interesting to see what we end up doing with him, because I don't know what it is between Billy Guerin and Evison, but they just, for some reason, they're like oil and water. They're just not clicking. I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, I've heard rumors and reports and stuff like that maybe, he's just kind of behind the scenes a little smug, maybe like, like the young guy with a lot of money syndrome, finally,
Yeah.
maybe enjoying the nightlife a little more and stuff like that. Or maybe they just don't like his style of play, because we went out and got Klingberg at the trade deadline, who's literally an older version of Kalen Addison.
Yeah.
So that move still kind of puzzled, like made me scratch my head a little bit,
Mhm.
but I understood why they did it. But
Yeah.
yeah, and that's pretty much about it there. I mean, it's going to be kind of intriguing now. What player outside of Bedard are you most looking forward to seeing for the Blackhawks then? Like young guy, old guy, whatever.
Well, Lucas Reichel's up there just because I'm a big fan of Reichel. Was glad we drafted him. A player I've been really keeping an eye out for because I have a weird suspicion he's going to crack the roster this year. It's Ethan Del Mastro. He's a big defenseman who can score, lay massive hits, and is actually pretty quick on his feet. So he's a player to watch out for because I know the Hawks play the Wild twice this preseason.
Mm-hmm.
DeMastro's going to be out on the ice each game, and he could be one to be worried about if you're a Wild fan.
Well, to be fair, though, we also have a few prospects on our team that if you're a Blackhawks fan, you're probably not going to be too happy with, especially if Rossi can actually step up. Sammy Walker can step up. Then we also have like a few deep prospects whose names are kind of escaping me right now, but we have such a deep, like, defensive,
Mhm.
like backlog. And obviously Brock Faber, that's probably a name you guys are going to really get familiar with.
Yeah.
Because especially in that short sample size, I mean, he's already shown that he's at worst, a starting third line defensive pairing. And who knows, he might even take over where Dumba was, like with him and Brodeen as the, I guess, technically the number 2 pairing, because Spurgeon and Middleton will be the number 1 pairing, which then leaves that third pairing, which that's one thing that frustrated me about like what the Wild did last year with their third D pairing. Like they kept bringing out both Alex Goligoski and John Merrill at the same time, who are both
Yeah.
tripping over their feet more time than I could count. And it was just absolutely annoying seeing that, because of course it would always be on their shift. At least it felt like it was always on their shift, where Merrill or Goligoski, more often than not Merrill, would do a dumb play or something like that, and we'd see a fast break coming the other way.
Yeah.
And that, annoys the heck out of me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what can you do? I mean, it's not like we have a ton of money to really do anything with anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Which, obviously I knew that this year is going to be kind of more of a transitional, basically more like a what do we actually have here
Yeah.
to like start building for the future, because like I say, I mean, you guys are coming up, St. Louis, if they can ever get their defensive side going, they're right there with a lot of young guys. Arizona's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado will still be relevant for a few years yet with a lot of their younger guys. I don't know how much longer they really have, and you can't even rule out Nashville either. They have a lot of prospects that are starting to develop. Winnipeg's going to be interesting to see, just
Mm-hmm.
because they did get rid of some key pieces, but they also managed to get a lot back in the Pierre Dubois trade, which,
Yeah.
so you can't always necessarily count them out. And I'll be curious to see what they do with Hellebuck and Scheifele, because right now it sounds like that they might be there to start the season, or at the very
Mm-hmm.
least get into training camp.
Yeah.
So, and like I say, just from the haul alone, they'll at least be in the mix. I don't know if they'll be, contending for a playoff berth, but they'll at the very least be a thorn in the side, which they tend to be, especially against the Wild. Like the Wild and Jets have always had very, very physical and very just power, like just very almost visceral games against each other
Yeah.
recently, especially over the last few seasons.
Seems like the Jets and Wild have actually developed a true rivalry. I would say this: I never viewed the Wild as a rival to the Blackhawks ever, because the Hawks beat the Wild up every time in the playoffs they met, and the games in regular season are usually never heated.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what though. I mean, to be fair though, the Wild, I mean, taking off your Blackhawks glasses there, the Wild never really had a true rival, really. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, not, like obviously Blackhawks, Red Wings, or Blackhawks, in those like early times and stuff like that, like a true genuine I can't stand your bleeping guts rivalry.
Yeah.
Pretty much since they've really been in the league. I mean, they've had glimpses of teams that they despise. I mean, obviously the Wild, I think the rivalry with the Blackhawks is more amongst the fan base, especially, with all the stuff that has happened in the past and stuff like that. That's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way and stuff like that, but not really on the ice, I'd say.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it pretty much seems like every time or every other time the Wild play the Jets, it's always a physical sort of grinding out sort of game. So in your opinion though, as a Blackhawks fan today, as of 2023, what is your rival now? Like what game, like what team do you see on the schedule? You're like, yep, there's going to be about 500 suspensions here. Like as of
Uh,
today, I should say.
it's between Nashville or St. Louis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're the fans hate each other still. The teams do hate each other, and whenever it gets up, the games are heated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
Oh yeah,
it's
Wild Blues too could be another one, especially after the NHL robbed us of a freaking goalie fight.
yeah,
I'm still like angry about that. Even Blues fans were like angry about that. and stuff like that. It's just like, hello, both guys wanted to fight here. Both teams were willing to drop the gloves here and stuff like that. But especially after the whole playoffs thing from 2022, which still, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see coming, it'll be interesting to see just how this year goes, because there's going to be a lot. Well, if I had to predict right now, I'll go ahead and propose this question to you too, then, Wendy.
All
Your
right.
top 3 teams in the Central this year. For me, I'm going to say the Avalanche. Wild are probably still going to be up there, and maybe I'd probably say the Blues are probably the 3rd team right now, because again, the Blackhawks are still a couple years away. Nashville, I mean, I don't know, because how many different pieces they threw into Nashville. I don't know if they're all going to gel. Or Winnipeg is another intriguing one too, just because I don't know, are they still going to move on from Hellebuck and Scheifele? Are they still going to be part of that team? They still have decent pieces there. So if I had to, I'd swap maybe Winnipeg with St. Louis. But Arizona's another sneaky team, but I still don't think they're ready quite yet. So that's why I say it's probably the Avs, the Wild, and you can maybe put either the Jets or the Blues there, I'd say.
I will say this. Dallas will win the Central Division this year with
Oh, yeah, I
Colorado.
can't forget about Dallas, too. Yeah,
Yeah.
never mind. Snatch that. They'll be the other team instead of the Winnipeg or St. Louis.
It will be Dallas winning the division with Colorado finishing 3rd behind Minnesota, and no wild card team out of the division.
So what do you see as the wild cards then?
LA will be up there for wild card contention, and I think Calgary has a bounce back finally.
Ooh, I still have to, again, with Calgary, they're more of a wait and see for me.
Yeah.
Outside of the Pacific, if I had to guess, right now, the top 3, excluding wild cards, it'd be Edmonton, Vegas, I'd say Seattle.
I will say my top
Either
3.
Seattle or LA. Seattle or LA for that last spot, I should say.
I will put top 3 for Pacific at Edmonton winning the Pacific. Vegas, I think ends up in 3rd behind LA. And the wild cards ends up being Seattle. Now that I think about it, Calgary's lost so many players that could help
That's
them.
my big concern there too.
I will put at that second wild card spot of I could see it happen and they can go on a run finally, and I could see Vancouver do it.
What was the other team besides Vancouver, you said?
I could see so Edmonton winning the division with Vegas or LA in that 2nd or 3rd place in that division spot. The 2 wildcard teams being two wildcard teams being Seattle and Vancouver.
Oh, Vancouver. All right. I like that spicy take. So would you say that's probably your hot take playoff team then, is Vancouver?
Yes. I like the moves they've made this offseason. They seem like they work for that roster, and I feel like they can make the playoffs this year.
I mean, that definitely would be interesting to see. I mean, especially with all the turmoil over the last few years and stuff like that. I mean, at the very least, it would make things interesting again. Maybe spark up some old rivalries and stuff. Kind of get, that area just something to believe in again and stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess for me, if I had to pick maybe watch out this upcoming season team, like, whoa, that might be kind of out of left field, but not really. I could see either Ottawa or Detroit in the East potentially being that sort of. I mean, they're both like borderline. Ottawa probably a little less likely, but I mean, they still have enough key pieces there now with Tarasenko. Even in his old age, that he could still at the very least help out in a certain way if they can use him correctly. With Corpusalo, hopefully finally being that steady goaltender that they've been looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit over there for me and stuff like that. So I guess for me, like I say, yeah, it'd probably either be Detroit or Ottawa would be that sort of dark horse team, I guess, to keep an eye on.
Yeah. I'll say my Atlantic Division prediction. Um, I have Toronto winning the Atlantic at first place, with Florida ending up in second,
All right.
Tampa at third.
All right. Yeah.
Uh, and I do believe both the wild cards will come from the Atlantic, and the two wild cards will be Detroit at the first wild card spot with Buffalo.
Honestly, you pretty much about nailed my entire Atlantic too. Like, Toronto's probably at this point, either Toronto or Tampa are probably the two top teams, I'd say.
Yeah.
Just because, again, I don't know how, like, if the losses of, like, because the Tampa Bay Lightning have lost a couple of key players, but for some reason they still manage to be up there every year
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. Toronto, at this point, like I say, that they're probably still my favorites to win.
Mm-hmm.
But to be fair, though, I also have to probably, instead of at this point, I have to see with Boston before I can officially knock them out, because they're like kind of like Pittsburgh and Washington. They're like two of those teams that, this is finally the year they're going to not make it, and they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. You know what I mean? They're like one of those teams. However, I will say, though, I agree that Boston probably won't make it just because of all the losses that they've had
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But I will say, though, I don't think they're going to be like a bottom team. I think they still might have a year or two left of like contending. It's just
Uh-huh.
going to be, do they still have enough there from last year while the other teams are rising up in the Atlantic? Because there's a lot of like high rising teams. Case in point, Detroit and Buffalo are probably the two teams to keep an eye out. Because if they can get momentum going and they can get a run going, they could pull off a potential Florida situation. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they will, but Buffalo has enough young pieces and enough veteran leadership where if they could get something like working, they could
Mm-hmm.
basically had kind of a crib like compare it to like the Montreal run from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe not a team you would see potentially winning it all, or like like one of those barely playoff teams that just somehow goes on a run and brings it all the way to the end. Maybe not win it, but like they have enough talent there that they could make it
Yeah.
a very, very difficult time for whoever's coming out of the West. And then, like I say, Detroit, they're finally got enough pieces together, I feel like, where they can make a playoff push. And then, of course, until Toronto breaks up their core, until Tampa officially goes into the skids,
Yeah.
you can never count those guys out either.
Yeah.
And then I'd say probably for the Metropolitan, the Rangers are probably still going to be one of those top teams. I don't know if I'll have them at number one. Carolina's probably going to be up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, who do I want to go with for number three? Let's go Washington, I'd say. I can't say why per se, but I have a feeling they'll come back. And you could potentially maybe throw Pittsburgh in there as well. The Islanders are another one. It's just one of those things where, like the Eastern Conference, especially between the Metropolitan and the Atlantic, like the top teams are like far and away the better of the teams, but yet there's so much in the middle there for the wild card spot that
Yeah.
any one of about 6 teams could make the playoffs at any time. Islanders, Pittsburgh, Washington, the Bruins you can't count out. I mean, Ottawa could surprise people. Detroit can surprise. Buffalo can surprise. I mean, there's about 6 or 7 teams there that could really make things interesting.
Yeah. For my Metro picks, winning the division will be the New Jersey Devils. I've been seeing reports that they're one of the main teams going after Hellebuck.
Ooh, yeah.
And if
That's
they
what I
get
forgot about New
Hellebuck,
Jersey, too. Put them in there as one of my top 3.
if they land Hellebuck, I predict them to make the Stanley Cup final.
Ooh. Hot take. I like it.
So the Devils winning the division, Carolina coming in second, with the Rangers closing it out at third, and no wild card team from the Metro. Pittsburgh, they really didn't make any moves to improve their team. Washington, they're clearly on the back end of their window officially closed, and so did Pittsburgh. And the teams that are left in that division, I just don't see as contenders for playoff spots.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few teams that I have a feeling aren't going to be anywhere near there. Like, obviously, Philly, Columbus, they still have a few years left, especially because depending on, supposedly, this is an all new and improved Babcock, but we'll wait and see there.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, pretty much. Philadelphia, they're finally embracing what they should have done about 5 years ago and actually tank and actually get the prospects going.
Yep.
Stuff like that. But, you know, Chuck Fletcher and Paul Fenton and those guys, and just brings me bad dreams right there. Bad nightmares right there.
Yeah.
Like a depleted prospect pool and all that stuff. So I kind of understand where Philly's coming from there. But again, for me, the reason why I say like Pittsburgh, Boston, Washington, the Islanders, teams like that, you can't rule out is because you can never really rule them out until they're out, or, you know, if something drastic happens. Because how many years towards the end they were saying this is finally it for Pittsburgh, this is finally it for Washington, and yet they somehow still managed to creep their way in and, you know, exceed everyone's expectations. Granted, now they actually have competition, you know, with a lot of these younger teams are finally getting their pieces together and are finally starting to ascend from the basement to middle of the pack to potentially even top. So now a lot of these teams that have been rebuilding for the last 5 or 6 years are finally starting to become true contenders and more than just, you know, a feel good, hey, look story. So
what team do you predict will be the first team to fire a head coach this year?
Boy,
it's a good question.
Honestly, Philly.
You think they'll fire Tortorella?
It depends on what they decide to do for the future here too, because Tortorella is one of those guys where, you know, you have to have a certain team around him for him to really succeed.
Oh, yeah.
And depending on what they decide to do there will depend for me on how well they're going to be and stuff like that. But because think about it, a lot of the big teams that needed to fire their coach did. Calgary finally did. Vancouver has a new set of voices. Columbus, they just signed Babcock, so at the very least, they'll probably let him play out this year unless it's an absolute train wreck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess Florida could be one of those teams, but they made it to the Cup last year with a depleted roster and stuff like that. Detroit and teams like that, they're rebuilding and stuff like that, but they're finally at the cusp. Chicago just fired their guy a couple years ago, right? And now you finally have the right voice.
We have the right head coach.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Richardson's. I honestly will say this: Luke Richardson will be with the Blackhawks when we're contending again.
Yeah, I can see that.
He's that good of a coach. He's smart, and it seems like the players work well for him. And that's the type of coach this team needs right now in a rebuild, and this team will need in a contendership role.
Yeah, because that's also going to be the key too, Wendy's. It's like what teams are going to be going towards that rebuild that already haven't fired their coach and started that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the big thing.
If you want to know my prediction of who fires their coach first, it's between two teams: St. Louis.
Oh yeah.
And Toronto.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
I can see Sheldon Keefe get fired if the Leafs get off to a slow start, which they have history of doing at the start of seasons to get off to slow starts. And I could see Sheldon Keefe get fired. And the reason why I think Berube could get fired by the Blues, it's because that team's going into a rebuild, and he just is not the right coach for a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, ironically enough, as I was kind of going through my soliloquy or vocal, I was kind of thinking, well, wait a minute, St. Louis could be an intriguing name to keep an eye on too. But it's just, will the front office actually do that? You know what I mean? You also have to think about that too. Is it's like, unless you get off to either a god awful start or you kind of know going in that we have plans to move on. And who knows? Especially the reason why I said Philly is because they have a lot of different guys coming in. Like the front office has changed quite a bit, even though I could honestly still see them giving him maybe a year or two or writing out the contract potentially. But I don't know if they'll re-sign him type of thing. Babcock, again, they literally just signed him in Columbus, so you have to wait and see there. Florida, like I said, they made it to the Cup, but there was rumblings about that last year. New York, the Rangers, they just, rehired they hired a new coach, Laviolette, right?
Or is that Laviolette just got hired by them.
So, yeah, it's like they just hired a coach there. Islanders, maybe. Just because that's another team to keep an eye on, too, depending on.
Pittsburgh could be one that could be one to watch out for, too.
That too, yeah, because Crosby and Malkin are finally at the end of the rainbow here. I mean, it's going to be not that much longer here before you really have to start thinking about rebuilding, not just trading for players.
Yeah,
and I guess another name to keep an eye on, even though I don't see that happening this year, Evason. The reason I say that, it just depends on the prospects coming up, how that goes on, because it's not so much firing Evason because he's a bad coach. It just might not be the right fit depending on the team coming up. Yeah. Because Evason is very much like a defensive-oriented sort of, not like a trap, like, the New Jersey Devils trap era, but he preaches on defense and, puck control and stuff like that. And in a league where it's a lot more high tempo, up and going, bang, 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 up and down the ice, might not quite suit the players. With that said, though, I do not want them to fire Evason, at least as of now, unless stuff really hits the fan. But I don't see that happening. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting start to the season, I will say, because there's still a lot of question marks out there. And kind of going back to the Pittsburgh thing, too, or do you see Erik Karlsson getting traded before the season?
It's going to be difficult. If he does, it's going to be San Jose finally caving and doing a 50% retention on him because it sounds like they still don't want to do a 50% retention.
But the thing is, though, he has $11 million cap hit. You
Oh yeah,
have to. Like,
they have
there's no way in heck anyone's gonna bite on that. Not even Chicago.
no. Teams they will have to find a third team to take on more salary, and I don't think any other team wants to retain Carlson for 4 years at 25%
Yeah,
of that.
especially with the salary cap being as tight as it is this year. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just no. Why do you think a lot of teams have gone to arbitration?
Oh yeah.
Because they just can't flat out afford it. In years past, maybe you can kind of get away with some of that stuff, but it's just there's so little money where it's just like you really can't do much of anything regardless. And it's not
Mhm.
like the free agent pool this year necessarily was the juiciest one. I
Yeah.
still hear rumblings about the 2024 free agency class being that class.
Yeah.
Depending,
Next
I
year's
guess.
next year's class is supposed to be a much stronger class, but the thing is, next year there's still a lot of time for teams to sign those players back up.
Bingo. And also, it sounds like, too, the salary cap could potentially go up, too,
Oh yeah.
which, thank the Lord, especially for those cap strap teams like that, because at the very least, it'll give them a little bit of wiggle room and stuff like that. But, yeah, I mean, and like I say, also, kids, like Nick's audience and stuff like that, too. Don't forget, this is the last year of Adidas.
Indeed.
So it'll be interesting to see going into next summer, just sort of like templates and like kind of seeing, like leaks and stuff like that and how these are going to look and, how basically they decide to pull the Adidas template with Fanatics branding and stuff like that. But that's for more like jersey collectors, not so much like the on ice play, at least of now and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I should say, though, right now, if you had to predict, who do you see in the Stanley Cup for 2024?
As of right now, um New Jersey and Dallas.
Ooh, really going spicy there. All righty. I'm going to say Edmonton, and I also like that New Jersey pick. So it'll either be Edmonton, New Jersey, or Edmonton, Carolina, I'd
I
say
can
right now.
see it. I liked how Dallas really made their roster for this upcoming season through this off season.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up Duchesne was a solid, smart signing by Dallas. They still have quite a bit of young players coming up in their pipeline this season,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I kind of think we could see Dallas making the cup run again.
For me, out of the West, I'd say the top three. Like for me, right now, I'm just going to give you my top three: Vegas, Edmonton, and like I say, probably either LA or Dallas. You can kind of intermingle the two as of right
Yeah,
now. But if I had to pick, I'd probably say, yeah, Dallas, Vegas, and Edmonton are my top three, with LA sort of hanging right around there. I just
yeah,
don't see really any other team in like the Central being that real force like in years past, at least as of this year. Because Colorado, they still have to deal with no Landeskog for another year, and they did
yeah.
lose a couple of depth pieces.
Losing JT Compher was a bad hit for that
Mm-hmm.
roster.
So who knows there? And like and then even in the Pacific, I have to wait and see on Vancouver or teams like that. Or Calgary is always an interesting one. Edmonton, as long as McDavid and Draisaitl can do what they do, and if you have some form of defense, even a little bit, There's no
Yeah.
way, heck, you shouldn't be able to make deep runs like they have been recently. And their goaltending situation, with Stuart Skinner being potentially the guy of the future, even though he was a rookie this year, and he still did pretty well. I mean, if you're an Oilers fan, you got to be, happy about that at least. But
I still don't trust Stuart Skinner. I will say that.
fair. But like I say, he was also a rookie last year. And to be fair, I had no idea Gustafsson was even going to be half as good as he was last year. But I'm still cautiously optimistic there, too, just because how much of that was actually his potential and his goaltending, and how much of that was a contract year trying to prove it to everybody. But
Yeah.
he's only 25 as well, Gustafsson. I don't know how old Skinner is, but they're still relatively young in the goaltending scheme of things. So
Yeah.
they have like the potential to build for the future and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be intriguing to see next season just how everything turns out and just how everything starts up, basically. I mean, because last year, if you would have asked me after 10 games, would you have seen the Wild make the playoffs? I would have been like, well, I mean, maybe. But we started off so horrible that it was
Hmm.
not looking good. And then November hit and we finally, hit our stride and stuff like that. But it's just like you never quite know because there's some teams that start off so hot and then they just tail off. And there's going to be a lot of young teams to keep an eye on. A lot of young teams.
So, Jake, are you going to be paying attention to the prospect tournament between the Hawks and Wild this summer?
Maybe like highlights and stuff. It just basically depends on when it is and like what time and all this and that. And the other thing, because like I say, with football season starting up soon too, I do a lot with not just like the Wild, but also the Vikings and stuff like that too. So
Yeah.
now I start watching both and everything. And I've never really been like a massive prospect guy per se,
Hmm.
just because prospects come and go. There's so much turnaround that usually happens there. But I'll definitely try to keep an eye and just kind of listen and the very least get an idea, especially of some of our younger prospects like ECHL guys and like borderline AHL guys as of now.
Yeah.
Just because, yeah, I mean, it's something to keep an eye on and stuff like that. And at the very least, kind of get an idea of what to expect, what players could be moved, what players do you actually see being a part of the future, and stuff like that. But
Yeah. I will say I will be watching all those games just because the Hawks are going to have probably the best prospect core in a prospect tournament this season.
and Wild, you could argue, would probably have either the best or second best.
I mean, them going up against the Blackhawks only in the prospect tournament. There, I think St. Louis may have entered our prospect tournament also. So those three teams, it's right now the Hawks have the best prospect pool.
I'd still say you could argue the Wild there too, but then again, I mean, let's put it this way: both the Wild and Blackhawks have arguably like top 5 prospect pools in the entire NHL,
Yeah,
which is again crazy to think that just how many like young hungry prospects that there are just even in the Central alone, not even just with the Wild or the Blackhawks, but just how many potential young superstars are out there and stuff like that. So, but again, for me, I'm gonna probably more focus on like what Iowa does, like the Iowa Wild and the Minnesota Wild, once we actually get towards the season, like training camp and preseason and stuff, because those are the guys that I'm gonna be like basically watching like a hawk, for lack of a better term, there and
yeah,
stuff like that, because a lot of those guys could potentially be, contributors for more than just 3 games a season. Like they could actually be part of they could play half the season, 3/4 of the season. They could, heck, who knows? We could find even our next Kaprizov or something like that. You never know and stuff like that too. And there's still a few prospects too that I think the NHL world will be curious to watch.
oh yeah,
Mainly being Rossi and Walker, I'd say. Rossi, Walker, and Wallstedt are probably the three big ones that, have the NHL's attention and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, hey, it's always kind of fun and interesting talking about that stuff. So,
Well, it's almost been an hour long of the stream. I think I might call it a stream here just because I still need to eat dinner and stuff.
yeah.
It was good talking to you, Jake.
Yeah, like I say, I always like talking hockey and sports and stuff like that,
Yep. See you in the Twisted group chat.
Yeah.
I'm shocked we didn't have a jersey post today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll probably have something either for tomorrow or Wednesday. It's just kind of hard now, like especially when you only have so many jerseys and stuff you can really do or whatnot. And then, like I say, Trev is kind of going through some of his own stuff and stuff like that too. It's just there's always a lot of stuff going on, like either mentally or in real life or just in general. And now, like I say, now that we're getting closer to the sports seasons and stuff like that coming up too, the NFL season, we're in training camp right now. So if you're an NFL fan or NFL fans are getting ready for that, which then means we're only about a month away from prospect pools and like prospect camps and then training camp. And then before you know it, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, we're in the heart of football season, and then hockey season starts up again. So it's like, and then we're pretty much busy until June.
Yep.
But hey, I mean, I like it. Hockey's, definitely by far become my number 2 sport, only behind football. But then again, I grew up watching football since I was like this big. So, like, pretty much very, very young and stuff like that. And I've only really gotten into hockey over the last, I'd say, probably 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like I say, it's it's a fun time of year, and hopefully, the hottest part of the year is about over with because holy crap, ugh,
It needs to cool off.
yeah. I mean, I'm one of those guys who likes fall. Like, I'm a fall baby. I was born in October and stuff like that. So there's just always something about that time of year where you could still walk outside and, like a t-shirt and shorts and stuff like that. But you could also throw on like a hockey. What was that?
And not feel like you're dying.
Yeah, or freezing to death, depending on, But yeah, I mean, and then of course, hockey sweaters and stuff like that. You can actually wear hockey jerseys again without boiling and baking. So
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was good talking with you. So guys, if you're still in the chat, I want to say thank you for watching the broadcast. Please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And most of all, let's go Hawks. And thanks, Jake, again.
Thank you.